My name is Lauren Mitchell, and I learned very early that some people care more about blood than they ever care about love. They use the word like a weapon, like a measuring stick, like an excuse for cruelty. My uncle was one of those people. He always made it sound like DNA was the only thing that mattered, and everything else, every act of kindness, every sacrifice, every moment shared, counted for nothing if you were not born from the right body. I grew up knowing, in a very matter-of-fact way, that I was not my father's biological daughter. My mom met him when I was 5, married him when I was 6, and by the time I was 7 I had his last name and a room in his house that smelled like fresh paint and hope. He never called me his stepdaughter. Not once. I was always his girl, his kid, his Lauren. He tucked me in at night. He taught me how to ride a bike in the cul-de-sac until I scraped my knees bloody, and he still insisted I could do it. He attended every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every little dance recital that I stumbled my way through. If love was a test, he passed it 100 times over. My uncle, on the other hand, failed from day one. His name is Robert, but everyone in the family called him Rob. He is my father's older brother by 3 years, though he likes to act like the age gap is a lifetime. From the very first time he saw me, I could tell he had already decided what I was. Not who. What. I was the extra. The outsider. The unnecessary attachment his brother brought into the family. I remember being 8 years old at my grandparents' house, sitting at the little kitchen table with my legs swinging under the chair, listening to the grown-ups talk. My dad was in the living room helping my grandpa adjust his TV cables, my mom was drying dishes with my grandma, and Uncle Rob leaned in the doorway with a beer bottle in his hand, watching me with a look that did not belong on the face of an uncle. He had this habit of talking just loud enough for you to hear, but not loud enough to be called out. I remember him saying, almost lazily, "It is not the same. You raise your own, or you do charity, but charity is not blood." My grandma shot him a sharp look. "Robert." He shrugged. "I am just saying. There is a difference." I pretended I did not hear. Kids pretend a lot. We learn to look at the plate, at the wall, at our shoes, anywhere but at the person who is quietly trying to make you feel small. But words get inside you anyway. They linger. They echo. They build a little room somewhere in your chest and sit there. In every family picture, my dad always pulled me close. My uncle always kept a little space between us, like he did not want anyone to accidentally assume we were related. At holidays, he brought gifts for his own kids, my cousins, the way normal uncles do, but whatever he gave me always felt like an afterthought. A cheap stuffed animal, a plastic bracelet, something grabbed in a hurry at the gas station on the way over. Never wrapped properly. Never chosen with me in mind. I told myself it did not matter. I had my dad. I had my mom. I had my grandparents, especially my grandfather, who treated me like I was made of gold and soft air at the same time. Grandpa always called me kiddo and winked like we shared a secret that no one could touch. He never once made me feel like I was anything other than his granddaughter. He is the reason my uncle lost more than he ever imagined. When I was around 16, the whispers became less subtle. It was not just side comments anymore. It was little jokes. It was questions followed by silence. At a family barbecue, someone asked my dad if he thought I would take after the Mitchell genes, and my uncle smirked and said, "Which ones? She does not exactly have them." Everyone went quiet. My dad's jaw clenched. My mom's hand tightened on the serving spoon. I felt my cheeks burn hot, but I kept my face blank and took a sip of soda like I had not heard. Later that night, when we were leaving, Grandpa walked me to the car. He rested his hand on my shoulder and said, "Some people only know how to count blood. That is because they never learned how to count love. You hear me, Lauren?" I nodded, trying not to cry. He tipped my chin up gently. "You are my granddaughter. The rest is noise." I did not know then how much power those words carried. I did not know they were more than just comfort. I did not know he was preparing the ground for something bigger. Time passed. I moved out at 19, started working part-time while studying, learned how to pay rent on a tiny apartment that never stayed warm in the winter no matter how high I turned the thermostat. My dad helped when he could. My mom checked on me constantly. My uncle never called once. The older I got, the more openly he drew the line. At Christmas, he would say things like, "Well, my brother's kids get the Mitchell heirlooms, that is just how it works." When talk of future plans came up, he would casually say, "Everything needs to stay in the bloodline." He always glanced at me when he said that, like a knife he pretended was a joke. My cousins noticed it too. One of them, Mark, once said, "Uncle Rob is old school. Do not take it personally." But it is hard not to take it personally when the person is literally telling you to your face you do not count. The thing about silent cruelty is that it builds slowly. People like my uncle never throw one punch. They throw 1,000 small ones spread out over years. They are careful, deliberate, restrained. That way, no single moment is big enough to call out. Nothing loud enough to make a scene over. But inside, the bruises stack on top of each other. Then everything changed the year my grandfather got sick. It started as little things. He forgot appointments, repeated stories, left the stove on. Then it got worse. Hospital visits. Doctors' words like cognitive decline and long-term care. My uncle started circling like a hawk that smelled something in the fields. He began stopping by more. Always with that fake concerned tone. Asking Grandpa if he had looked at his papers. Asking him if he was sure everything is in order. Asking him who was on what, like dividing up the future before the present even had a chance to breathe. I visited too, but my questions were different. Are you comfortable? Have you eaten? Do you want me to read to you? Do you need me to call the nurse? Grandpa always smiled when I came in, even when he was tired. He would squeeze my hand and relax a little, like the room itself felt less scary when I was in it. One afternoon, I came in and found my uncle at the foot of the bed with a stack of folders on his lap. Grandpa looked tired, his eyes a little glazed, and Uncle Rob was talking with that patronizing tone people use when they are pretending to help. All I am saying, Dad, is that it does not make sense to leave things to people outside the bloodline. It only complicates probate. It is not personal. It is just how estate planning works. I stopped in the doorway, my heart hammering, my stomach twisting. Grandpa's eyes moved to me. Something flickered behind them, sharp and clear, cutting through the fog. He did not look at my uncle when he spoke. He looked at me. You done talking, Rob? My uncle chuckled nervously. I am just trying to help you think logically. Grandpa's voice stayed soft. But there was steel under it. I have been logical my whole damn life. Do not start doubting it now that you are scared. Uncle Rob's smile vanished. Grandpa nodded toward the door. I think I'm done for today. Leave the papers. My uncle hesitated, then stood up reluctantly and brushed past me on the way out. He gave me a look, half annoyance, half blame, as if I had ruined something he was working on. When he left, the room felt lighter. I walked to the bed. Grandpa patted the chair next to him. Sit, kiddo. I sat. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then said quietly, Your uncle is worried about the wrong things. I didn't say anything. I just held his hand. He squeezed back. When people are scared, they start talking about blood. It is the oldest excuse in the world. I swallowed. What did you tell him? Grandpa turned his head and looked straight at me. I told him nothing. That is between me and the papers. I frowned a little. Papers. He smiled slightly. You do not need to worry about that. You just keep being who you are. The rest is already written. Already written. I did not fully understand what he meant. I would later. And that would be the day my uncle's obsession with bloodline walked into a wall he never saw coming. Because while he was counting genes, my grandfather was counting something else. Who stayed? Who showed up? Who loved without conditions? And that is where the trust papers came in. Grandpa's health declined slowly at first, then all at once, the way old trees fall after decades of holding themselves upright. One day he was walking around the yard with his cane, pointing at the birds on the fence like he was giving commentary on nature itself, and the next week he couldn't remember where the bathroom was. The change frightened all of us, even the ones who tried to pretend it didn't. My uncle became a permanent fixture at the house. Always hovering. Always watching. Always asking the same questions dressed in different words. Have you thought about distribution? Have you made your final choices? Do you want to avoid conflict later? Who gets what? Who is responsible for what? He talked like everything was business. Legal. Efficient. Logical. But the truth was obvious. Maybe not to him, but to everyone else. He was scared. Not scared of losing his father, but scared of losing control. Scared that the life he believed he was owed was about to go somewhere he didn't approve of. One afternoon I arrived earlier than usual and saw his car parked crooked in the driveway. I stepped inside quietly, not meaning to overhear anything, but the voices carried from the den loud enough that I froze in the hallway. Uncle Rob was pacing. You are not thinking clearly, Dad. You are confused. You are stressed. These decisions take clarity. Grandpa sounded tired. I have plenty of clarity. Uncle Rob raised his voice. You are not listening. She is not family. Not by blood. She does not belong in the trust. My heart clenched, sharp and hot. Grandpa's answer came slow, but not weak. I decide who belongs. Then my uncle said the words that would define everything that came after. You are letting that girl take things that were meant for us. That girl. Not my niece. Not Lauren. That girl. I took one step back, pressing my hand against the wall, grounding myself. The words didn't surprise me. Not really. I had known how he saw me my whole life. But hearing it out loud, hearing the ugliness with no filter, still stung deeper than I expected. Grandpa coughed. His voice cracked but his tone stayed firm. She has been more of a Mitchell than you ever were. The silence after that was instant and violent. I imagined the look on my uncle's face. Shock first. Then insult. Then something much darker. Ego pierced by truth. He spoke again, lower now. You are not thinking straight. You need help making these decisions. You are sick. You are old. You keep forgetting things. Grandpa's voice steadied. I forget names sometimes. I forget dates. I forget where I left my glasses. But I do not forget who showed up and who didn't. I do not forget who loves and who complains. I do not forget who holds my hand and who holds out their hand asking for something. Another long pause filled the room. Then Grandpa added, you talk a lot about blood, Rob. But love does not need DNA. That is what you never learned. I closed my eyes, pressing my lips together so tightly it hurt. I didn't want Grandpa to know I heard. I didn't want him to feel embarrassed for defending me. I didn't want him to feel guilty that my uncle would twist this moment into resentment. But I stayed there in the hallway until I heard my uncle's footsteps storm past the doorway, his face red, jaw clenched, muttering under his breath like he had just been humiliated. He didn't see me. And that was the moment I understood something. My uncle wasn't just angry. He was afraid. Afraid of losing what he thought he deserved. Afraid that love mattered more than blood. Afraid that Grandpa's trust, his real trust, not the legal one, had shifted away from him. A week later, Grandpa passed away. The house felt different without him. Smaller. Emptier. Quieter in a way that made the air feel heavier. My dad sat in the living room with his head in his hands. My mom cried quietly at the dining table. I sat on the stairs, my hands pressed together, trying to hold myself together the way Grandpa always did. My uncle walked into the house like he owned it. The first thing he said wasn't I miss him. It wasn't I loved him. It wasn't even I'm sorry. It was, where are the estate papers? No hello. No pause. No breath between the loss and the claim. My father looked up slowly, his voice strained. Rob, not right now. But my uncle insisted. We have to make sure everything is sorted. These things get messy. He told me he left instructions. He told me we needed to do this properly. I want to see the paperwork. Something in me hardened right then. Like a frost spreading across a field. My mom tried to gently ask him to give us time. He ignored her. He kept walking from room to room, opening drawers, checking the study, muttering to himself, where would he keep it, where would he put it, I know he left it, I know he did. My dad stood up finally and grabbed his arm. Stop. Uncle Rob jerked his arm free. You do not understand. I need to make sure things go where they are supposed to go. I stepped off the stairs, my voice colder than I had ever heard it. And where is that? He turned around quickly, startled, his eyes wet but not from grief. From fear. He swallowed. Dad and I had discussed things. He said the Mitchell assets needed to stay in the Mitchell family. I stepped toward him. And I'm not Mitchell to you. He did not answer. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. 2 days later, the family gathered in the lawyer's conference room for the official reading of the will and trust documents. My stomach twisted as we waited. My uncle sat across from me, knee bouncing, jaw flexing, hands clenched tightly. He kept glancing around the room like someone expecting a surprise. He took a deep breath every few seconds like he needed to calm himself but couldn't. My father sat quietly, holding my mother's hand. My mother kept squeezing my knee gently like she wanted to reassure me but also needed reassurance herself. The door opened. The attorney walked in carrying a thick binder and a sealed envelope. His face was professional, calm, unreadable. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and opened the binder. First, he offered condolences. Then he began. My uncle leaned forward, eyes hungry, ready for confirmation that everything would go to him. He kept looking at the binder like the pages inside belonged to him already. The attorney read slowly. Carefully. Making each sentence clear. Grandpa had left small sentimental items to each of us. Photographs. Books. Personal objects. But when it came to the trust papers, the room shifted. The attorney cleared his throat. And regarding the Mitchell Family Trust, the following beneficiaries are listed. My uncle straightened his back, chin lifted high. The attorney continued. The primary beneficiary and successor controller of the trust shall be Lauren Michelle Mitchell. The room stopped breathing. My uncle blinked. Then blinked again. He looked at the attorney. At my father. At the binder. At me. And then he spoke. What did you just say? The attorney repeated it slowly. The primary beneficiary is Lauren Mitchell. My uncle's voice cracked. That is not possible. She is not blood. The attorney didn't flinch. He opened the binder and turned it around so my uncle could see the signature page. This is your father's signature. These are his instructions. He made no amendments. He filed it himself. My uncle stared at the signature as if it might change if he glared hard enough. His face drained of color. His mouth opened and closed but no sound came out. My father looked at me with tears in his eyes. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. The attorney continued. In addition to the trust, Mr. Mitchell wrote a personal letter to accompany the documents. It is addressed to Lauren. He handed me the sealed envelope. My uncle watched in stunned silence. All those years he counted bloodline. All those years he dismissed me. All those years he believed he was untouchable. And in one moment, one sentence, one signature, every illusion he had about his place in the family cracked clean down the middle. My silent revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It wasn't dramatic. It was a truth written in black ink. A truth that didn't need me to raise my voice. A truth my grandfather had carved long before my uncle tried to erase me. And my uncle wasn't done breaking yet. Because the letter in my hand was about to do what no argument ever could. The letter felt heavier than paper should. My name written on the envelope in my grandfather's handwriting made my chest tighten. He always wrote slowly, carefully, like every word deserved respect. I ran my thumb along the sealed edge but didn't open it yet. I wasn't ready. Not in front of everyone. Not while my uncle stared at me like I had stolen something from his hands. The attorney cleared his throat again, folding his hands neatly on the table. There is more. The trust grants Lauren full authority over all assets, including property management, financial accounts, and any future distributions. She will make all final decisions. My uncle jerked forward in his seat. No. No, that cannot be right. That cannot be right. She is not even related. The attorney maintained his calm tone. Your father filed these documents himself. Everything is notarized and recorded. He was of sound mind when these were signed. My uncle slammed his hand on the table. I am his son. The attorney nodded politely. And he knew that. He still chose this. My uncle's face twisted with rage. He looked at my father desperately, as if expecting backup. Say something. She should not be in charge of our family trust. My father looked at him with eyes that had softened and hardened at the same time. You do not talk about Lauren that way. My uncle stared, stunned, like someone had just spoken in a language he didn't recognize. My father continued, voice steady, not rising. She was his granddaughter. His real granddaughter. And he loved her more than anything. The silence that followed wrapped around my uncle like a fist. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped. His eyes were glossy with anger, not grief. His breath shallow, sharp. He pointed at me. This is not fair. This is manipulation. She got into his head. She made him do this. I spoke for the first time since the attorney read the trust. I said, quietly, he signed everything before his diagnosis. He was clear. He was deliberate. He knew what he wanted. My uncle shook his head violently. No. This is wrong. This is against the bloodline. You cannot give family legacy to someone outside the line. The attorney leaned back slightly, folding his hands. The term family is defined by the grantor. Not by biology. That one sentence broke something in my uncle's expression. Not anger. Not disbelief. Fear. My uncle had spent his whole life convincing himself that his place in the family was guaranteed by blood. That DNA was a crown he wore no matter how he behaved. And now he realized the truth. Love had outranked blood. Loyalty had outranked entitlement. Actions had outranked ego. The attorney closed the binder. Unless there are contesting documents, these instructions stand. My uncle lunged forward. I contest them. The attorney didn't blink. On what grounds? My uncle stuttered. She is not blood. He had no right to give her everything. The attorney raised an eyebrow. That is not a legal reason. My uncle swallowed hard. He was confused. He was manipulated. The attorney calmly slid a stack of medical reports forward. These show your father passed every cognitive test during the time the documents were signed. He was fully competent. My uncle stared at the papers like they were poison. Then his eyes moved slowly to me. Not with love. Not with understanding. With desperation. He whispered, Lauren, you can fix this. I didn't move. Fix what? Give me control. Give me something. I am his son. You do not understand the burden I have carried. I was supposed to take care of everything. I was supposed to run the trust. I was supposed to keep the Mitchell name intact. You cannot take that from me. You cannot. It is not right. I stared at him, my heart steady, my breath calm. For years, he had spoken loudly. For years, he had taken without guilt. For years, he believed silence meant weakness. But I learned something from my grandfather. Silence is not weakness. Silence is power. I said quietly, I am not taking anything from you. Grandpa already chose. My uncle's voice broke. I should have been the one. I am the oldest. I am the real Mitchell. I shook my head once. Grandpa knew who showed up. And who didn't. My uncle's breath hitched. His face contorted. He wanted to argue, to fight, to shout, but the attorney's documents were louder than any word from his mouth. He slumped back into his chair slowly, like a man sinking under the weight of water. The attorney stood. If there are no further objections, Lauren will sign the acknowledgement and take formal control. No one spoke. Not my mom. Not my dad. And definitely not my uncle. After the meeting, I stepped outside into the cool air, gripping the envelope with my name on it. My parents waited near the parking lot, letting me have a moment alone. My uncle, on the other hand, stormed out of the building like he was escaping a fire. He looked at me across the lot, jaw tight, face blotchy. He hesitated, like he wanted to speak, but nothing came out. Not an apology. Not an excuse. Not even anger. Just silence. For once, he had nothing to stand on. He got into his car, slammed the door, and sped away without looking back. I exhaled slowly. Cold, quiet justice. Not loud. Not violent. Just final. When I got home, I sat at the dining table, placed the envelope in front of me, and finally opened it. My hands shook slightly, but my heart was steady. Grandpa's handwriting filled the page. Kiddo, if you're reading this, it means I am gone. Do not be sad too long. I had a good run. I had good years. I had good family. You were one of the best parts. Loving you was easy. Watching you grow was one of the reasons I stayed alive as long as I did. Now listen carefully. Some people think blood defines family. They are wrong. Love defines family. Loyalty defines family. You treated me like your grandfather long before I earned that title. That is why I trust you with everything. The house, the land, the accounts, the decisions. You will be fair. You will be honest. You will do what is right. Your uncle is not a bad man. Just a scared one. Scared people cling to blood because it is the only thing they think no one can question. Be kind to him if you can. Be distant if you must. But never let him make you feel like you do not belong. You belong. You always have. Love. Grandpa. Tears blurred the ink before I realized they were falling. I folded the letter gently and pressed it to my chest. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from my uncle. It said only 2 words. We talk. I stared at it for a long time. Then I locked my phone. I didn't reply. The coldest revenge is silence. The kind that doesn't return calls. The kind that doesn't argue. The kind that doesn't justify. The kind that makes the other person sit alone with the truth they tried so hard to deny. And I let him sit with it. In the days after the reading of the trust, a strange stillness settled over everything. Not peace, not victory, not revenge, just a stillness, like the air after a storm has passed but the ground is still wet and heavy with what came before. My uncle didn't call again. He didn't show up. He didn't confront my parents. He didn't try to fight the decision. He simply vanished into silence, and for a man who spent his whole life talking, complaining, correcting, and demanding, his quiet was louder than any argument he could have made. My parents checked on me constantly, each visit softer, more careful, like they were adjusting to a new version of me and didn't want to trip on something fragile. My dad cooked more than usual, leaving containers in my fridge as if that could replace the ache in his eyes. My mom brought over fresh flowers even though she knew I didn't like the pollen. She said they made the house look less empty. I didn't correct her. For a while, I just lived. Or tried to. My house felt familiar but foreign at the same time. The trust documents were neatly stored in the filing cabinet, Grandpa's letter in my nightstand. I read it every night before bed for a week, not because I needed reassurance, but because it reminded me of something important. I belonged. I had always belonged. Even when people tried to convince me otherwise. Then, slowly, the calls began. First one cousin. Then another. A great-aunt I hadn't heard from in years. A second cousin twice removed who suddenly found my number. All of them speaking in soft tones. All of them offering condolences and pretending to care, until the real question slipped in. So what did he leave you? They tried to make it sound like small talk. Like casual conversation. But I could hear curiosity bleeding through every word. I could hear the little sting of resentment underneath their sympathy. My uncle might have been the loudest one in the family to value bloodline, but he wasn't alone. The others just hid it better. My answers stayed simple. He left me the trust. And that was all I said. Some people congratulated me politely, then whispered behind my back. Some said nothing but never called again. Some tried to act overly friendly, suddenly remembering childhood memories we barely shared. But the one person who didn't reach out was my uncle. Weeks passed. Then one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the fence outside, my father knocked on my door. He didn't wait for me to invite him in. He stepped inside slowly, his shoulders slumped the way men slump when the world has worn them down to something thin. He said, softly, "Your uncle is drinking again." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pity exactly. Not anger. Just a dull ache. The kind you feel when you see a person collapsing under the weight of their own choices. I kept my voice steady. "Why are you telling me?" Dad rubbed his face with his hands. "Because he is talking about the trust. Because he is telling people that you manipulated Dad. That you took advantage. That you tricked him somehow." I nodded. That sounded like him. Dad sat down at the kitchen table, his head hanging. "I know you want nothing to do with him. And I don't blame you. But I need you to know something. What you're doing, the way you're handling this, your grandfather would be proud." My chest tightened again. Dad rarely talked about Grandpa like that, not with emotion in his voice. I sat across from him and waited. "Your uncle can say what he wants," Dad continued. "People like him always rewrite the story to avoid looking in the mirror. But the truth is simple. Dad trusted you. More than he trusted anyone else." I swallowed but didn't speak. Dad sighed. "Rob can't handle that. That is why he is spiraling." I exhaled slowly. "I'm not responsible for how he handles the truth." Dad nodded. "You're not. But he is asking to see you." I looked him in the eyes. "And what do you want me to do?" Dad hesitated. Then he whispered, "Nothing. You owe him nothing." Those words landed like a stone in a still lake. My father had spent his whole life stepping around his brother, tiptoeing through the chaos he left behind. Hearing him say that I owed him nothing felt like a door quietly unlocking. After Dad left, I sat alone for a long time. The house was silent. Not empty. Just silent. I stared at Grandpa's letter on the table and let the words settle inside me again. Be kind if you can. Be distant if you must. He didn't tell me to fix anything. He didn't tell me to forgive. He didn't tell me to save my uncle from the consequences of his own actions. He just trusted me to choose. 2 days later, I got a text. It was only one line. "I'm outside." I walked to the window and saw him standing by his car, arms crossed, shoulders rigid. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Not physically, but in the way people shrink when they realize the world is not going to rearrange itself for them. I opened the door slowly and stepped outside but didn't invite him in. He stared at me for a long time before he spoke. "Dad loved you." The sentence wasn't an accusation. It wasn't sentimental. It was a confession. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. He took a shaky breath. I thought I understood him. My whole life I thought I was the one who deserved everything he built. I thought you were, in the way. I let the silence sit between us like a mirror he was being forced to look into. He continued, voice cracking. "When the lawyer read the trust, when I saw your name, I thought it was a mistake. I thought he was confused. I thought maybe you pressured him. Something. Anything." He laughed bitterly. But then I went home and looked at myself. Really looked. And I realized something. My heartbeat slowed. I waited. I realized he saw something in you he never saw in me. He saw who you were. He saw who I wasn't. His voice dropped, barely above a whisper. And I can't change that. The wind moved across the yard gently. I stood still. He looked at me with red eyes. "I came to ask." "I don't know, maybe not forgiveness, maybe just understanding. I finally spoke. Understanding of what? He swallowed. That I was wrong. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then I said, quietly, I do understand. His face softened in relief. But I'm not fixing anything. The relief vanished. I continued, he trusted me. Not because of blood. Because of behavior. Because of loyalty. Because of love. Nothing you say changes that. He nodded slowly, eyes dropping to the ground. And I added one more thing, not cruel, just truthful. And I'm not inviting you inside. His shoulders sagged. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. I didn't comfort him. I didn't touch him. I didn't promise anything. I just let him stand there with the truth he had never wanted to face. After a few seconds, he whispered, I guess I deserve that. I didn't reply. He turned around, walked to his car, and closed the door quietly. No slamming. No yelling. No last-minute speech. He just drove away slowly, as if he finally understood that not every story ends with a dramatic scene. Some endings are quiet. Some revenge is silent. Some justice arrives without victory speeches. And some people finally learn that blood is not a shield. And love is not something they can claim by birthright. That was the last time he ever came to my door. After my uncle drove away that evening, the quiet of the street settled in a way that felt final. Not triumphant, not bitter, not joyful, just final. Like a chapter that had run its course and knew better than to linger on a last page. I closed the door gently behind me. And walked back into my house, the house Grandpa had trusted me with, the house he knew I would protect the way he once protected me. I sat at the kitchen table and let the silence breathe. My phone buzzed twice that night, messages from cousins asking what really happened with the trust, pretending they cared, but really chasing gossip. I didn't respond. The power of silence had become something I understood deeply now. Not ignoring. Not avoiding. Just choosing not to participate in noise that didn't deserve my energy. My mom called the next morning. She spoke softly, the way people speak when they are trying not to make a wound worse. She told me she was proud of how I handled the situation. She told me Grandpa would be too. She told me she worried I might feel guilty. But I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. I felt calm. Steady. Unshaken in a way I had never been before. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was fighting for a place in the family. I wasn't defending my worth. I wasn't trying to convince anyone that I belonged. The paperwork. The signature, the trust, none of that was really the victory. The victory was knowing that Grandpa saw me. He saw my heart. He saw my loyalty. He saw my presence. He saw my quiet consistency in ways that blood alone could never measure. My uncle, on the other hand, had spent his whole life believing the world owed him something for the simple act of being born into the right family. He thought blood was a guarantee. He thought DNA was a crown. And he thought he could use it to push me aside forever. But in the end, the truth didn't slam him. It simply arrived. Quiet. Inevitable. Undeniable. A week after our last conversation, my dad texted me a single line. Your uncle checked into a small apartment across town. There was no love in that sentence. No bitterness. Just reality. My uncle was finally living the life he had spent years avoiding. A life in which no one bent the rules for him. No one made excuses for him. No one protected him from consequences. He had to face himself. He had to live with the truth that Grandpa trusted me more than him. And he had to live with the reality that trust is earned, not inherited. As the months passed, I rebuilt the house room by room. I repainted the living room walls a warm, soft gray. I planted roses outside the kitchen window because Grandpa once told me roses grow best next to windows where someone can appreciate them. I even hung a framed copy of his letter on my hallway wall, not for display, but as a reminder of what real family looks like. One afternoon in early spring, I visited Grandpa's grave alone. There were fresh flowers there, not mine. Probably my dad's or my mother's. I placed a small stone on top of the headstone, something Grandpa used to say was good luck. I sat on the grass beside him and told him everything. I told him the trust was safe. I told him the house was safe. I told him I was safe. And I thanked him for giving me more than a legal legacy. He gave me validation. He gave me belonging. He gave me a truth that erased years of quiet hurt. When I stood up to leave, the breeze moved gently across the graveyard, the kind of breeze Grandpa always said meant someone you loved was close by. I closed my eyes for a moment and breathed in the soft scent of fresh grass. On the walk back to my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my uncle. It said only one sentence. I hope you're well. I stared at the message for a moment. Not angry. Not emotional. Not tempted. Not interested. Just steady. I locked my phone without replying. Some people imagine revenge as destruction. As fire. As sharp words. As explosions of justice. But the truest revenge I have ever known is the one Grandpa gave me. Being chosen. Being trusted. Being seen. And allowing silence to answer the people who once thought I was nothing. I drove home with the windows down, the wind moving through the car like a quiet reminder of every moment that led me here. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't searching for closure. I had all the closure I needed. My uncle lost the fight he started, not because I battled him, but because I refused to. His war required noise, but I lived in quiet truth. And quiet is stronger than most. People understand. Some endings echo. Some endings burn. But the best endings, the real ones, are the ones you live peacefully while someone else sits alone in the consequences of their choices. That was my revenge. Silent. Permanent. Unshakable. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. There are more stories like this coming your way. If you haven't yet, like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I've got so much more to share with you, and I want you here for all of it.